Hello and welcome. You're with IndiaPostLive.com, India's first live interactive web television. This is your very own platform where you can write into us with your thoughts, your inputs, your opinions on the various issues we talk about. Even if we don't talk about them, you want to raise an issue, please feel free to talk to us and we will have our own show around that. You can also, of course, post us your comments. You can leave us your video messages. You can also send us your tweets at hashtag IndiaPostLive and @IndiaPostLive. Well, yesterday or Wednesday, US President Barack Obama addressed the United Nations General Assembly, and in a very strongly worded speech, he said that there is a need to collectively unite and fight the evil forces such as ISIS. However, both you and I know that the war on terrorism is not limited to the ground level only. And terrorist groups no longer require the help of traditional media such as newspapers and even television to spread their propaganda. They are making ample and full use of the free-to-use internet and social media to publicize themselves, to talk about what they are doing, to post their videos, to post their messages and lure people from across the world to join their movement. Take a look at this report.
Terrorists no longer need the oxygen of publicity from traditional news media. They're making the most of the free-to-use social media and internet to be heard and seen, and also to increase their support base across the globe. Beginning with the Al-Qaeda, almost all global terrorist groups have established their networks via social media on the internet. And ISIS, one of the most deadly terror groups, has been using the internet to spread their wings in an unprecedented way. By its very nature, the internet is in many ways ideal for terrorist organizations for disseminating gory videos of human beheadings, call for jihad, and so on. There seems no censorship of this evil as the crimes are posted and reposted. Al-Qaeda alone is operating 30,000 online accounts, and social media accelerates radicalization of recruitment. While India has been able to control infiltrations along the border, its biggest problem is manipulation of social media by terrorist groups. Monitoring terrorists, their extremist propaganda, and recruitment efforts in an entirely new battlefield is now a task the intelligence agencies of most nations are gearing themselves for.
The radicalization of recruitment and the cyberspace that is being used in to promote those radical thoughts and to promote terror activities. That is what we're going to talk about. Remember, you can join the conversation anytime you like. But right now, joining me is Abdullah Nizamani, who joins us from Karachi, and he is a lawyer. Abdullah, thank you so much for joining IndiaPostLive.com.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Your first reaction, we just talked of how Al-Qaeda itself has over 30,000 online accounts, and ISIS also is using social media in a very big way, and a lot of youth from both your country and as well as my country seem to be radicalized, seem to be influenced. A lot of young people have gone missing supposedly to join these groups. Your first comments on this, Abdullah?
You cannot see ISIS or Al-Qaeda in isolation. They are on the top, whereas they have roots at grassroots level in Pakistan and across Muslim world. And now even they are spreading their roots in the West, including Australia, United Kingdom, and America.
Right.
So they have been using this social media sites for their benefit, and it's very easy and convenient for them to use, and they go unnoticed whenever they use these sites, and it's quite easy for them and quite convenient for them to spread their message through these sites, and their fear among the hearts and minds of the masses.
Absolutely. And what is really scary is social media is such a positive thing. I mean, you're keeping in touch with your friends, you're keeping in touch with your family, you're posting your thoughts about issues. But these people have successfully managed to infiltrate that space, and it becomes difficult for, of course, the administrators of those sites, as well as for ordinary citizens like us to kind of stay away, isn't it? Okay, I think Abdullah. Okay, I think there is a.
It's quite easy for them because if hello.
Yeah. Sorry, please go ahead. We got you back. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. They cannot be detected because for the reason if I come across a radical site headed by some extremist organization of Pakistan or India, unless a sizable number of people, users of social media sites, report them to the social media sites administrators, they cannot be banned. So unless they are banned, they spread their message across world, and they're like quite easy for them to ingrain their message among their minds.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. At this point, let me bring in a video response that we have all the way from Israel. David Hivry, he is a political activist from Israel, and this is what he had to say about the entire issue of terrorist organizations using social media platforms. Take a look.
When addressing the issue of how Islamic terrorism, the Hamas, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, are utilizing the social media and the internet to enlist support from their crazies around the world, I think that normal, decent people need to be aware of the fact that the Islamic terrorists who are utilizing the social media are taking advantage of decent people who are sharing their content. The reason that they are filming themselves carrying out these gruesome terror attacks of decapitating individuals and mass murder and blood and so forth, they themselves are filming these events and uploading them onto the internet because they know that we are so shocked by seeing that, and it causes many people in the free world to share that, to show how gruesome these Islamic terrorists are. But by doing that, we are doing a service for the Islamic terrorists, and we need to realize that before we press the share button and share these scenes, how is that going to serve the purpose that we intend? And of course, we mean to fight the Islamic terrorism and to smash them out. So the social media, the Facebook and Twitter and all of those other platforms have become polluted with all of the Islamic, not only their propaganda, but their pornography of murder and blood that is all over the social media. It's disgusting, and it needs to cause each individual to consider, well, if I'm going to share those pictures of the pornography of murder, or if I am going to not share that and just write my own content of how terrible that is and how it needs to be stopped. And of course, decent people need to be pressuring their own governments to allocate the resources that are needed in order to smash out this disgusting and horrific acts of terror that are causing the death of so many innocent people around the world.
All right, that was David Hivry, who is a political activist in Israel, and he had some very interesting points to make. Abdullah, I hope, did you hear that? Did you hear what he said?
Yeah, part of it I heard.
All right. He said that, simply by sharing such gory videos, simply by sharing the kind of propaganda that these people are trying to do, we are doing them a service. And the entire, he called it pornography of murder. He said no matter how much it shocks us, no matter how much it disturbs us, we should not share it. That is what he said. I
Exactly.
think that's a very interesting thing. But okay, let me bring in Mr. Pawan Duggal now. He is a cyber law expert. Sir, good afternoon and thank you so much for joining India Post Live again.
Good afternoon.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, sir. We are talking about the terror groups and how they are using social media and how they've gone online for their online propaganda and also recruitment. Now, India, during Narendra Modi's visit to the US, India is definitely going to take up this issue with the United States. What kind of expectations can we have? Because the NIA has said that more than 300 young people have gone missing, purportedly, to join these groups.
Well, clearly it's a big challenge in today's perspective, but the question is, how do we deal with it in a legal, policy or regulatory framework?
Right.
Primarily because none of the existing policies or the regulatory frameworks that we have are at all even prepared to look in that particular direction. In fact, most of our frameworks have been more traditional and conservative in the approach, and they have not even envisaged the phenomenon of people actually gone missing or doing activities which are radical in nature or which are primarily aimed at joining these kinds of groups. So I think the expectation is to break the ice. The expectation is to find out commonalities in ground in terms of how countries can work together, in terms of identifying as to what is the relevant source of activities in this regard, how can the activities be tracked down, and more significantly, what steps can be taken so as to ensure that these kinds of electronic activities in the digital and mobile ecosystem do not land up prejudicially impacting the sovereign interests of sovereign governments and sovereign states.
Absolutely. Sir, you talked of what can be done, what steps can be taken. Now, US also seems helpless in a few ways because a lot of these servers are in fact not even within the United States, right?
Yeah, that's where we come across the very complicated issue of jurisdiction. Internet has made geography history, and this boundaryless medium that's come across allows you to just about start your operations from anywhere in the network across the world and target computer systems and networks located physically in any other part of the world. So getting, number one, to track you, number two, to identify your electronic trails and footprints, and number three, trying to get you to book are big challenges because of huge jurisdictional issues. It's indeed sad and ironic that while internet has made a boundaryless medium, the fact is that national boundaries and national states have come up with artificial national boundaries in cyberspace, all because they want to exert their sovereign interests in cyberspace. So I think somewhere down the line, you will need to come up with international common accepted principles of the rules of the road. Now, come what may, you can be in any country, but if you're going to do any activity which specifically forms within the ambit of these minimum common standards of unauthorized, unwarranted activities, then I think you should be targeted, you should be picked up, and then appropriate steps in accordance with the laws of the relevant jurisdiction could be taken up. But a lot of work really needs to be done, considering the fact that internationally speaking, we yet do not have one single treaty on jurisdiction.
Absolutely. So what is your idea or your assessment of the situation as far as India is concerned? How are these activities actually, I mean, we only have this report of certain young men gone missing, but what exactly is the ground reality as far as India's influence is concerned when it comes to terrorist groups such as ISIS?
I think here we begin to start realizing the intrinsic limitations that the exercise of sovereign laws has beyond the scope of the physical territorial boundaries of a particular nation.
Okay.
Now, it's a common precedent that the laws normally have territorial applicability and that they would not apply outside your territorial boundaries. The Indian cyber law has taken a different approach. It has actually couched the law with extraterritorial jurisdiction, which effectively means that it says you can be located anywhere in the world, but if your activities impact a computer system or computer network, which is physically located in India, then you become amenable under the Indian cyber law. Well, good that you have given extraterritorial applicability of laws, but practically speaking, it becomes very, very hard to implement the same. And on international platform, we need to appreciate that India is not yet a signatory of even some of the basic existing frameworks that exist. For example, there's only one international convention on cybercrime. That's an example of a successful working treaty, which is the Convention on Cybercrime of the Council of Europe. This has been on since 2001. More than 45 nations, not only of the European Union, but also America, Japan, South Africa, have gone ahead and signed the treaty. India has not been a signatory of any of these treaties. More significantly, that's the reason why India lacks that intrinsic, shall I say, bandwidth and negotiating power in terms of forcing and coercing international thought processes to look in the direction of the principles that India is so propounding.
So India is going to raise the issue of Asim Umar to the US. Asim Umar is the India head of Al-Qaeda, and he has been doing a lot of online propaganda. And why does India believe that he can be controlled only with US intervention? Why is that?
Well, a couple of things. Number one, the Indian government already has the powers in its hand. We amended the Information Technology Act 2000 in the year 2008. Okay. And thanks to these amendments, we came across with a very, very comprehensive section known as the Section 66F, which defines the offense of cyber terrorism. Now, when you go ahead and examine the offense of cyber terrorism, as contradistinguished to other cyber legislations across the world, you realize that the Indian definition is possibly the most comprehensive, and it provides for life imprisonment and fine. Now, despite having that provision in place, we haven't seen any documented case where India has gone ahead and effectively enforced, or shall I say, invoked that particular piece of section, being Section 66F. Now, if as a country you're not even invoking that provision and you're looking for help from outside quarters, it basically is a wake-up call to show that you will have to look at a variety of options that are available to you.
Right.
Simply going to one particular jurisdiction, one particular country, and say, without your help, we'll not be able to proceed forward, is not necessarily the comprehensive way forward. That could be one component of the strategy going forward. But I think whatever ammunitions that we have in our arsenal, we must be in a position to simultaneously fire them so that we can get to our desired objectives and goals.
All right, great. Thank you, Pavan sir. And Abdullah, please stay with us. Right now, we're going to get you a video response that we got from security analyst from Karachi, Amir Mughal. And this is what he had to say regarding this issue.
To prevailing volatile situation in the region, we must pay attention to check how and why and from where these militant organizations are freely using social media to convey their message to all and sundry. And it is amazing, irony rather, that YouTube is banned in Pakistan and several militant and sectarian organizations openly and freely using social media to propagate their hateful ideologies, sectarian ideologies, to hound the peaceful people of Pakistan. India and Pakistan both should establish a contact between themselves to check the unchecked use of social media during the process of any contact between India and Pakistan, to sabotage that process by spreading false news. And this is happening from India and from Pakistan as well on social media. This must be checked from both sides.
All right, so Amir Mughal there saying that both India and Pakistan must do whatever it takes to sabotage what these people are doing, to turn people and how they're spreading their message online. Abdullah, coming back to you, you just heard Amir Mughal there talking. Now, this is a psychological warfare online, an online psychological warfare. People are being turned, people are being kind of misled into joining these groups. And also a lot of women have been lured in, women from countries like, as you mentioned before, from Australia, from Britain, from the US. What exactly is happening, the ground situation in Pakistan, if you could share with us, Abdullah?
Amir Mughal and Pawan Dugal have raised certain interesting points.
Yes.
But let me tell that the effect of ISS activities in Iraq and Syria is that a far-flung village from Karachi, around 200 kilometers away, a youngster who is way younger than me is more educated about ISS and about their activities. So this is the effect of social media sites. As Pawan Dugal said, I think I should comment on it. He said that there is hardly any legislation universally about these cyber crimes.
Surely.
Let's forget, for the sake of argument, that there is no legislation or very few laws available at United Nations level. But Pakistan and India collectively and individually can legislate certain laws, and they can set up a special force among their ranks, like law enforcement agencies, or they can set up a special unit in these law enforcement agencies who can identify and make a surveillance over these sites, and at least they can take individual steps to ban these sites.
Is it that easy, Abdullah? It's very
Yeah,
utopian.
not
You're saying
that
something which we all
easy.
want. Trust me. But is it that easy, really?
No.
When the servers are all everywhere
See,
around the world. Huh.
See, there was some 2 years ago there was a derogatory video on YouTube, and Pakistan banned the YouTube since I think it's been 2 years that YouTube is banned. During this time of 2 years, certain individuals in Pakistan have like developed some softwares and some filters which can filter these videos and show rest of the material. So at I think individuals, information technology specialists, they can develop some some filters and can be put on these social media sites.
All right. Let me take that question to Pawan sir. Sir, is it that easy? I mean, I feel, and you know, we've also had another cybersecurity expert, Dominic Karunesudas, and he's always said nothing is 100% foolproof. You are never 100% secure. That's a myth that there is 100% security. And he managed to scare all of us. We were talking about the Gmail hacking and all of that. So again, this is a very serious issue. But can it really be possible? Is it really workable what Abdullah is suggesting and what Amir Mughal wants?
Well, on a theoretical plane,
Yeah.
it could be done.
How?
Whether we will be able to do it practically is a different matter altogether.
Right.
Because even on a theoretical plane, these are only two sovereign states. Now, two sovereign states can at best write a common code, a common treaty, and can agree to work together in terms of trying to fight against cyber terrorism. However, the fact remains that these two components of the two sovereign states, even joined together, are not having the complete control over all the technical aspects of the network that exists on the internet. And now we have an increasingly bigger problem at hand, which is that majority of the Indians or people in the Indian subcontinent are going ahead and leapfrogging into the mobile web. Today, as per the latest statistics, 61% of all Indian online users access internet only through their mobile phones. Now, in this scenario, where mobile web is coming so critically a center stage attention for all of us, it becomes even more difficult. How do we land up trying to come up with appropriate regulations? That's the reason we have found that in the last 1 or 2 years, countries have tried to agree and ink up certain bilateral treaties. But the fact is, given the fact that internet is in its own self a multilateral organization, and given the intrinsic architecture of the internet, it might be good, noble intention to proceed forward, but I will actually see some practical roadmap difficulties ahead in terms of even roadblocks as you go forward, because your information may not necessarily be only limited to be emanating from the computer systems and computer networks that are located in these two countries alone. Theoretically, it looks a fantastic idea. Practically speaking, I have some very strong reservations of how it can be effectively implemented, but that does not mean that undermines the commitment of both the nations to cyber terrorism. I think every sovereign nation needs to understand and is well recognizing the fact that if it is not going to condemn cyber terrorism, tomorrow the same cyber terrorism is going to potentially be used against its own sovereign interests in cyberspace. So I find comity of interest amongst all the nations in this direction.
Right. All right. I'll just take you up on that because I want to ask you about whether the SAARC countries can all get together and do that. But before that, let me bring you another video response that we have from Amara Ahmed, who is an assistant web editor with The News from Lahore, and this is what she has to say.
Not only technologically more advanced than Al-Qaeda was, it is also using the social media more effectively, and not just for propagating their message but also for recruiting and for spreading their version of Islam. And we have seen that youngsters from Malaysia and Scotland, as you've seen those girls, they fell prey for this kind of propaganda. So Twitter and Facebook have been taking down videos or other content, blocking their accounts. That's not always possible, especially if the message is not violent. So what we need to do is perhaps we need to become more conscious users and to understand that there are people around there who can, who can attract our youngsters with this kind of message, but also we perhaps need another kind of narrative which is against the is and which informs people as to the problem there is and the kind of callousness that is there in Syria. So we have to bring the version from there as well. Simply blocking them or bombing them is not enough. So it's an ongoing problem, and we'll have to upgrade ourselves and our social media and our consciousness in order to fight it.
All right, that was Amara Ahmed, assistant web editor of The Nation. I apologize for my previous mistake, The Nation of Lahore. All right, Abdullah, practical difficulties, as Pawan sir said about what you're saying, though it's of course theoretically a brilliant idea. Let me ask you, I'm about to pose both of you that question. Do you see the SAARC countries really getting together in a unified manner to talk about this problem? Because we all agree that one has to at least recognize online terrorism as a threat to humanity. Do you think the SAARC nations could meet and at least begin to take some steps forward on that?
Yeah, I think SAARC countries can do this thing, but before going for a long run, I think SAARC nations individually should experiment these things at their home. Like Pakistan can go for a surveillance unit, a special surveillance unit would can, and legislation in this regard is first thing. If there is no legislation, I don't think there will be any kind of conviction or rest of the things.
Right.
So firstly, legislation, the reforms in the legislation, and then a practical unit which can surveillance on these networks and these sites and can identify or ban as may consider fine.
All right, all right. Pawan sir, after what happened yesterday, the Mars Orbiter mission, we've become a leader in our own right. When do you see India becoming a leader when it comes to controlling cybercrime and controlling online terrorism like this?
Well, we have a long way to go, primarily because the figures, when you look at it, clearly show that we're all fighting a losing battle. $445 billion, that's the worldwide cost of cybercrime last year. And large quantum of cybercrime takes place in India as well. Well, it's a different matter altogether that cybercrime in India is grossly underreported.
Yes.
And the figures do not really show the correct picture. However, I believe the decks have now been cleared for India to work in the direction of becoming a leader in the digital and mobile ecosystem.
Yes.
The Indian government has already announced its Digital India program, which aims to convert or transform India into a knowledge economy by the time 2018. So I think give India about a few years, and by the time it's 2019, 2020, I would see India to be one of the topmost leaders in the efforts and initiatives of all programs aimed at regulating, minimizing cybercrime, both in the digital and mobile ecosystems.
So over the past few years, we've had people complaining about brain drain. I do hope that we don't lose our young men, our young talents to groups such as those, such as ISIS and Al-Qaeda through their online propaganda. I think that is the best we can hope for.
Yeah, and I like to just also state that activities have already begun. Like in India, on 20th of November, we are doing an international conference on cyber law, cyber crime,
Where?
cyber security. This is happening in New Delhi on the 20th of November, which is going to have the creme de la creme of people in India, in the Indian government, Indian corporate sector, but large number of foreign speakers will be joining us and thought leaders as to what will be the emerging trends that nations really need to address in terms of looking at the complicated mesh of issues created by cyber law, cyber crime, and cyber security. So that's happening right in our country, and that should, I think, efforts like these should propel the growth forward as far as cyber security is concerned. In fact, the URL is very simple. It's cyberlawcybercrime.com. And I'll actually encourage all the viewers of your particular program to go and look at that initiative. And I believe initiatives like these will help further create more awareness amongst the policy stakeholders in moving forward in this direction.
All right. Thank you so much, Sir Pavan sir. It was a great, as always, a pleasure to have you on the show to talk about this very, very important and serious issue. And it was great having you. Thank you so much. Abdullah from all the way from Karachi joined us. Thank you so much for joining us with your inputs. It was great having you on the show. I would also like to thank all those of you, David Hivery, Amir Mughal and Ammara Ahmad, all those of you who took the time out to give their very, very important views on this topic, which is something that we all need to fight together in a cohesive manner. All those of you who watched this program, thank you so much for watching. Please send us your views, your comments on indiapostlive.com, and of course send us your tweets, #IndiaPostLive and @IndiaPostLive. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.